Hey everybody, this is Minion Soldier, and this is the episode that is going to replace what was going to be Calling All Minions. That episode, I recorded it, I uploaded it, and I watched it, and I was like, you know what? There was one question in particular that I wanted to kind of squeeze into that episode that I don't think that I did, and it had to deal with, what's it going to be like to operate, large capital ships? What's the life going to be like for a lot of these players? And I think that it was a question that deserved a more comprehensive answer. And when I kind of started to really think about it and really kind of hash it out in my head based on, things that I'd thought of before, things that I had kind of surmised before, I realized that it was going to be in and of itself an episode. So we are going to be dealing with this today, and this is going to be kind of a comprehensive look at that question. What's it going to be like to operate these ships, and should you operate a ship like this? Now, in the immediate present of 3.5, I think a lot of people are noticing that flying around in a fighter is not a lot of fun. It's a little bit risky. Certainly the new flight engine has made things very different. A lot of people are kind of getting used to this new reality or not. Navigating around a solar system is not as fun as it used to be. And, that's just to kind of make it so fighters are, they're more for a local thing, and they need that carrier to get them where they're going. They need that Idris, they need that Kraken, to get where they're going. But I think that in reality, this just doesn't mesh up very well with what most players want out of the game. And so even though some people may look at that idea and say, okay, well, I think that's a great idea and that's the way it should be. Chris Roberts said so that's the way it should be. I think that what you're going to see in the community is you're going to see a lot of people who are out there flying fighters who are saying, oh, I want to go to ArcCorp. And then they're going to try going to ArcCorp in something like a Cutlass, and they're going to say, oh, that was so much better. And then they're going to go to ArcCorp in something like a Caterpillar a little later down the road when they've made more money, and they're going to say, oh my God, that was so much better. And then maybe somewheres down the road, they're going to make the trip in something a little bit more substantial, and they're going to be like, yeah, that's kind of the way I like it to be. When you look at smaller ships, they're facing a gauntlet of problems. They're unable to scoop their own fuel. They have very limited range. They're very inconvenient to operate. If you happen to fly from, say, Crusader to ArcCorp to do a mission and you realize that you don't have the right ship to do that mission, the idea of flying back to Crusader to get a different ship that may be, stuck in a hangar there in the reality of a finished game universe in which you just can't make ships magically appear wherever you want them, whenever you want them. Players are going to start to gravitate away from those smaller ships. So all these little things that we're adding to the game, heat and, these fuel issues now, I think that they're going to have the opposite effect. They're going to make players abandon smaller ships. And so I think that this question of what a ship like this is going to be like to operate is going to become a lot more relevant to a lot of people. And I think a lot of people are going to start asking these questions, and they're going to start looking at the fighters in their hangar, and they might start saying, maybe it's time to consolidate all of those out and get something like a Corsair, like a Connie, like a Caterpillar, and abandon the smaller ships that really just, aren't going to be all that convenient to operate day in and day out. When you think about the reality of crossing an entire solar system and maybe bringing the wrong ship, that's kind of a big issue. And certainly the larger ships traverse solar systems far more quickly than the smaller ships do. You might look at something like the Cutlass and think, I never wanted that ship. It's it's a poor man's Super Hornet if it's even that. It's not that good, but now all of a sudden you're kind of going like, oh shit, you know what? That actually fulfills quite a number of roles. That opens up a whole lot of doors to gameplay that originally, I kind of didn't really realize were going to become relevant. You don't know what missions are going to show up on your mobiGlas, and so having something that can roll with the punches is going to become a lot more important to you. And realistically, I've said it 100 times, the Cutlass really is kind of the gold standard as far as ships go, in terms of enabling you to basically deal with whatever's coming down the pipe. It has a lot of room for upgrades. It has a lot of room for cargo. It can bring a hit squad if you need one. It can deal with fighters fairly well, depending on who's flying it. Obviously, there are certain people who just take a Cutlass down like it's nothing, but there are other people out there in Cutlasses who could take those people down as well. There's always a bigger fish. And I think just the day in, day out convenience of something like the Cutlass is going to make a lot of people kind of go like, yep, I want that. And as they kind of, use the Cutlass and make more money, they're going to move into things like the Caterpillar, the Corsair, the Connie, and they're going to move up and up and up. There's going to be players out there like, oh, I'm already set. I've got my Carrack. I've got my Hammerhead. I've got this. I've got that. I'm good to go. And there's going to be a lot of people out there who are looking at their hangars and going like, I really don't want to spend half an hour crossing an entire solar system. It's time for a change. And I think that is going to become the reality that we are going to start seeing in the game, as a lot of players are going to be looking at their fighters, and then they're going to be looking at the bigger ships, and they're going to be saying like, I've got a few fighters and I don't really want to deal with all this shit, and the bigger ships just let me skip over all of this. You may sit there and say, well, I've only got one fighter, but if you think about it, if you join the crew of someone else out there who has one of these bigger ships, that can facilitate so much gameplay, so many things that you can go out there and do that originally weren't probably not open to you, a variety of gameplay that you just didn't have when you were flying around in just a fighter, if that's all that you have. And so you might think that your fighter is more or less your weekend on your own thing, whereas most of the time you're going to be out there crewing on someone else's much bigger ship, where the responsibilities are probably going to be a little bit easier on you. If you just have to take charge of a turret, or if you just have to take charge of, an engineering panel or something like that, that's going to be far simpler than having to kind of maintain all of these systems all at once when you're in a fighter. And so that kind of shared activity is probably going to become very attractive to a lot of people. And so I think that we are kind of getting to a point in the game where you're really going to start seeing the big ships really having their heyday. Now, a lot of them don't have their careers in the game right now. The Hammerhead, not really. Sort of. It can create all kinds of havoc, but there aren't Hammerhead dedicated missions out there right now. The Reclaimer certainly doesn't have its career in game like it should. And so, you're not getting a lot of use out of the Reclaimer, but we're getting to a point where these things are going to start hitting the game, and you're going to see more and more reason why not to fly a fighter. And so I think that CIG's idea of how to make these ships, more intense in terms of, the penalties that you pay for flying them to make the game feel more real and to make the universe feel more real, is probably going to be the exact thing that pushes players away from that type of gameplay, So I think that, a person who's a skeptic, a person who's a negative person may look at this and say, oh, it's just how they're trying to sell bigger ships and make more money. I don't really think that it's quite that. I think that they are genuinely trying to go for, trying to create almost like different little areas or different little pockets of human population where they congregate. And so a running joke in the Crusader area may not fly over in the ArcCorp area, and there'll be like ArcCorp type people who hang out and do the missions around ArcCorp, and then Hurston type people who do the missions around Hurston. I think that that's what they're trying to go for by creating this added barrier to transit. But I think the reality is that players are just going to gravitate towards the larger ships. I don't think that this is kind of like a nefarious plot to sell bigger ships for more money. I think that this is more a miscalculation on how to try to shape communities within the game, and it's probably going to have the unintended side effect of, you know, making players gravitate away from smaller ships. What you're seeing me do right now, you might think, oh, Minion's got his hammerhead, he's bringing it to our corp. Oh my god, this episode's going to be all hammerhead combat. And truth be told, it isn't. What actually happened is I died because of a glitch when I was trying to help my friends out with a mission, and I got teleported all the way back to Olisar, and I was like, oh, you know what, I'm not going to deal with this. So I hopped in the hammerhead because the hammerhead crosses the system the fastest, and I said, you know what, I'll be right back. And I just flew over in the hammerhead, not because I had any mission I wanted to, you know, do with it. It's just, it was the most convenient way to get around. Even more convenient than a fighter, which seems kind of like a bit of an oxymoron, but that's the way Star Citizen is designed. And so I think that this is kind of a very small example of the steps that I think players are going to take to kind of avoid these things, is they're going to gravitate towards the bigger ships or playing with other players who own the bigger ships. So I think that in a weird way, you know, one of the big concerns with the big ships was how am I going to crew it? It may not end up being all that much of a problem. If you think about, say, putting NPCs in your turrets, which kind of handles that sort of thing, and you have a few people running engineering or whatever systems on your ship, and you're out doing missions that are obviously going to be higher value, and you're able to get around that much easier and pay people that much more, it's going to become a much more attractive way to play the game. And so fighters, I think, which is something that, you know, CIG is obviously, you know, very into. There are so many different types of fighters, or personal craft, depending on how you want to classify them. They're going to end up being the things that are going to be catching dust in the, you know, in the hangar, while the bigger ships are going to get more of the play and more of the usage in the game. That's at least one possible outcome from this change. Now, of course, there's always the question of convenience, right? We've discussed, you know, the number of ways that this would be more convenient for players. But there is also the problem of getting on the ship and actually becoming a part of the crew. That can be a little bit inconvenient because you don't always want to tie yourself to a ship that might be offline when you log in. So we may end up getting to a place where at the end of a mission, you have to drop somebody off at a planet or somewhere, and then they're going to, you know, either find a ride somewhere else, or they're just going to say, you know what, when you make your final trip to ArcCorp, let me know. I'm going to get off the ship there. And then the next day, they're going to be in ArcCorp local chat saying, you know, looking for a group to crew a ship, and they'll just float around the galaxy doing that. I think that would be kind of interesting to see how something like that is going to take shape. Is it going to be like the old days of WoW, when you used to go into like Orgrimmar or Stormwind and you'd see someone saying, you know, group of 4 looking for a tank, we're going off to do this dungeon or that? Is it going to be something like that, or is it going to be like some kind of a group finder in the game that allows you to form up a crew based on who's available to do this mission and that mission or whatever? It's going to be interesting to see how those things form out, but I really do think that if CIG continues on the current course that they're on, that you're going to start to see a lot of the smaller ships become, you know, far less relevant to the game, and players are going to start gravitating towards bigger and bigger things. We might start to see a kind of a ship economy form where it's based on shares. You know, the pilot or the owner of the ship goes out, picks up the missions, does the missions, and they get however many thousands of credits at the end of the day as rewards, and they have to make a table to pay out everybody based on shares. Like, if you're a basic crew member in my crew, you get 2 shares out of, you know, 100. Or if you're, you know, my first officer and you take on all those responsibilities, then you get 5 shares or something like that. It'll be interesting to see how all of this develops, but I think that what you're going to start to see is that these ships are going to start to really shine in the universe, and fighters are going to feel like something that probably belongs a little bit more on the small scale starter end of things, and something that players are going to be very eager to get out of. I want to see how this is going to evolve, and that is my point of view on it. That's what I think is going to happen with the larger ships, is you're going to start to see some interesting cultural shifts within the community in terms of how do we group up, how do we form our play groups together, and that sort of thing. And you're going to start to see a lot more people looking at the big landing pads and the big ships and saying, you know, that's where I want to be. At least, yeah, that's my point of view on it. Anyways, that's the show for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and thanks for watching.
Thank you for watching. So if you want to keep up with the latest and greatest in Star Citizen and Squadron 42's development, please follow us on our social media channels. See you soon.